The first time humanity stepped into the galactic spotlight, nobody paid much attention. Earth was unremarkable, just another world orbiting a mid-tier star on the edge of a quiet spiral arm. Its people were small, soft-bodied bipeds with no claws, no natural armor, and barely enough technological advancement to leave their solar system. When they were invited to join the Galactic Convergence, a coalition of thousands of spacefaring civilizations, it was out of courtesy, not necessity. To most of the galaxy, humans were irrelevant, harmless. That assumption would be their first mistake. Humanity's strength was never in teeth or technology. It was an adaptation. Back on Earth, they hadn't become the dominant species through strength. They had done it through observation, patience, and manipulation. They had studied predators and learned to outlast them. They had lived among stronger creatures and learned how to control them. And now, they were applying those same instincts to the galaxy. From the beginning, humans approached the convergence differently. While most species brought their technologies and philosophies with loud pride, humans came quietly. They asked questions. They listened. They learned. Alien diplomats found them charming, eager to help, quick to apologize, always cooperative. In truth, every handshake was a data point. Every meeting, a study. Humanity was mapping the psychological terrain of the galaxy, species by species, culture by culture. Other civilizations focused on visible power, warships, shields, psionics, economic output. Humans focused on something else entirely, influence. They learned the social hierarchies of hive minds. They studied the grief rituals of ancient aquatic empires. They decoded humor, shame, and trust across over 900 languages. And through it all, they built a profile, not just of individuals, but of how entire civilizations thought, negotiated, and feared. Over the next 50 years, humans spread, not militarily, but culturally. They took up roles as mediators, translators, and peacekeepers. Small, non-threatening, reliable. When a border dispute arose between two rival species, it was a Terran negotiator who defused the crisis. When an ancient grudge threatened to ignite into war, it was a human who crafted the apology both sides could accept. Aliens began to trust humans, not just because of their actions, but because humans understood them. That was the second mistake. By the time most species realized something was off, humanity was already embedded in every major council, advisory board, and trade network. No one had seen it happen. No force had been used. Yet slowly, key decisions started to rely on Terran logic. Infrastructure began running on human design systems. Cultural exchange programs leaned toward Terran art, Terran literature, Terran values. Entire planets were quoting Shakespeare without knowing who he was. This wasn't coincidence. It was strategy. Back on Earth, a covert organization known as the Fold had been formed, a collective of sociologists, cultural analysts, and behavioral strategists. Their mission wasn't to control the galaxy. It was to prepare humanity to survive in it. And survival, they knew, would never come from being stronger. It would come from being necessary. The Fold didn't draft military plans. They drafted memes. They tracked linguistic shifts, emotional triggers, and interspecies relationships. They identified which fears could be calmed and which ambitions could be redirected. They knew which species craved leadership and which ones needed someone to blame. They positioned humans to provide both. And still, no one saw the danger. The Caesari Empire was the first to challenge human influence, launching an aggressive campaign to contain Terran expansion in the Mid-Orion corridor. But when they called on their allies, none responded. Some hesitated. Others had already signed economic treaties with Earth. Within months, the Caesari were diplomatically isolated, their trade routes collapsed, and their internal leadership fractured. The humans didn't fire a single shot. When asked how they had achieved this, the Terran envoy offered only a smile. "We help people listen to each other," she said. "Sometimes that means knowing when not to speak." It sounded peaceful, but it was predatory genius. While others fought to lead, humanity let themselves be led, right into the center of power. They didn't take control. The galaxy gave it to them. Humanity's real power didn't come from weapons or fleets. It came from trust. By the time most civilizations realized it, Earth was already woven into the very fabric of galactic society. Humans weren't conquerors. They weren't even leaders, not officially. They were advisors, peacekeepers, and problem solvers. Species that had spent centuries in blood feuds now shared trade routes, thanks to Terran mediation. Sectors plagued by piracy saw stability return after Terran arbitration. And when civilizations faltered, it was often a Terran aide who helped rebuild. No force, no demands, just a helping hand. And the galaxy accepted that hand without hesitation. Because humans didn't impose control. They offered relief. But behind that kindness was an unseen engine. A system designed to predict and guide galactic behavior. It was known only to a select few on Earth, and its name was the Fold. The Fold wasn't a military organization. It was something far more dangerous, a think tank of cultural strategists, linguists, anthropologists, and behavioral scientists. Their mission was simple: ensure humanity's long-term survival and influence through soft power. While other civilizations developed plasma cannons and warp drives, the Fold developed models of emotional influence and social entropy. They mapped cultural weaknesses the way generals map terrain. And they understood that in a galaxy bristling with power, no one wanted another empire. So humans became the opposite. They became useful. The Fold strategy was clear: embed Terran influence so deeply into every civilization's daily life that removing it would feel like tearing out a vital organ. They did it slowly, carefully. A Terran-designed education curriculum here. A communications upgrade there. In times of crisis, they offered emergency aid packages with helpful advisors included. And once installed, those systems never left. Even when the galaxy thanked them, they didn't see the trap. Because it didn't look like a trap. It looked like friendship. But the Fold didn't just want to help. They wanted to guide, gently, invisibly, toward a galaxy shaped in Earth's image. A galaxy of interconnection, tolerance, and consensus. But beneath that vision was an undeniable truth. If you control the culture, you don't need to control the people. Humans understood that stories matter more than weapons. And they told excellent stories. Terran films, books, music, and philosophy began to spread like wildfire. At first, alien audiences found them exotic, simple, emotional, often chaotic. But soon, they found something deeper: recognition. The Terran narrative of struggle, resilience, and redemption echoed across species lines. The underdog story. The hero who rose from nothing. The rebel who changed the world. These weren't just stories. They were templates, and the galaxy began to adopt them. Children on far-off planets grew up admiring Terran heroes. Alien poets wrote in Earth meters. Entire civilizations began to see themselves through a Terran lens. The galaxy didn't notice it was changing, but it was. Over time, even political structures shifted. Councils once dominated by ancient, dominant species began to vote along lines proposed by Terran diplomats. Not because humans demanded it, but because Terran logic made sense. It was practical, familiar, comforting. They weren't manipulating minds. They were setting the standard. And those who resisted, they weren't silenced. They were outpaced. The Zarnan Confederation, once one of the most aggressive border powers, tried to stem the tide of Terran culture. They banned Earth media, expelled human advisors, and attempted economic isolation. 5 years later, their citizens protested, not for freedom, but for access to Terran culture. Their young generation had grown up on Earth dramas and human music. They didn't see humans as invaders. They saw them as relatable. The Zarnan government fell not to war, but to its own people's demand to rejoin the Terran-aligned galactic flow. It was a lesson the galaxy didn't forget. And still, most refused to see the pattern. They believed the humans meant well. And to be fair, they did. Most Terrans believed they were helping. That Earth's unique perspective could unify a divided galaxy. Only a handful understood the real game being played. In a secure orbital facility above Saturn's moon Enceladus, the Fold tracked everything: voting shifts, cultural metrics, empathy indexes. They could predict with 87% accuracy how an interstellar law would ripple through galactic public opinion within 5 standard years. But they didn't rule. They nudged. And in that nudging, they moved entire civilizations. Some began to whisper. The Sereti High Order noted that Terran influence was disproportionate to their material power. The Korthai philosophers warned of a species that conquered through comfort. But their warnings were drowned out by the hum of cooperation, commerce, and cultural joy. Because humans didn't take power. The galaxy gave it to them. Willingly, gladly, and by the time they questioned it, Earth was already at the center of everything. Humanity's true weapon wasn't their intelligence or creativity. It was time. Where other civilizations expanded through force, humans expanded through patience. They didn't rush. They didn't dominate. They simply waited, and while they waited, they learned everything. It was the same strategy their ancestors had used on Earth: persistence hunting, stalking prey for days until it collapsed from exhaustion. No fangs, no speed, just relentless adaptation. That primal instinct never left the species. It was simply refined, sharpened, and pointed outward to the stars. In the galactic sphere, humans let others lead. Let them boast. Let them claim territory. Let them build great monuments to themselves. And in the background, humans helped file the paperwork. They fixed problems, eased tensions, translated misunderstandings. Always in the wings. Always the helper, the bridge, the neutral party. But it was never about peacekeeping. It was positioning. The Fold had a term for this: the deep patience protocol. A long-term strategy that prioritized influence over generations. The idea wasn't to force change, but to be so deeply embedded in the galactic routine that change simply wouldn't happen without Terran input. And it worked perfectly. When new sectors opened, humans were never the first to colonize. But they were the first to offer infrastructure support or cultural exchange personnel. Those positions often turned into permanent stations, then influence centers, then unofficial administrative hubs. Other species barely noticed. After all, the humans were just helping. The Genari cluster offers a perfect example. A minor territorial dispute between two emerging trade powers spiraled into a bureaucratic standoff. Human diplomats offered arbitration. Not only was the conflict resolved in weeks, but the new trade charter was written entirely in Terran standard legal format. Neither side objected. It was clearer, more fair, more efficient. And that's how it always began. Efficiency, fairness, empathy. That was the bait. What followed was far more subtle. Every Terra-mediated conflict ended with new communications hubs, legal software, or logistical systems. All developed on Earth, all under open-source terms, and all quietly updated through backdoor channels by the Fold. Not to spy, to steer. If a species began to drift toward instability, the Fold could predict the moment and apply pressure weeks before it became public. A well-placed scandal. A suddenly viral cultural moment. A Terran-sponsored NGO offering cultural revitalization grants. By the time anyone noticed a shift, it was already history. Yet no one saw a threat, because there was no blood. And that was the point. The Fold didn't want resistance. They wanted dependency. And by remaining quiet, kind, and helpful, they ensured no one ever pulled away. The only species that sensed the pattern were the Sereti, ancient beings with crystalline minds and long memories. They saw the network forming, the creeping centrality of Terran systems. They issued a quiet warning during a Convergence Council meeting. The web grows thicker. The fly thinks it chose the silk. Few took it seriously. The Sereti themselves tried to shift away from Terran systems, switching financial tools, replacing cultural networks, reducing exposure. Within 2 years, their economy contracted by 12%. Their trade partners lost confidence. Civil unrest grew. And when they finally asked for aid, it was a Terran development fleet that arrived with calm smiles and pre-written recovery plans. The Sereti never resisted again. This wasn't conquest. This was control through inertia. Even the Fold never used words like domination. Their internal documents spoke of stabilization, cultural harmonics, and planetary alignment metrics. Their goal wasn't empire. It was something deeper, something invisible. They weren't building a government. They were building reality. And it was working. Human universities across the galaxy quietly became standard institutions. Their ethics programs shaped diplomatic cadets. Their cultural exports shaped values. Even rebellion, when it arose, often did so in Terran ideological terms: justice, rights, freedom, not native ideas, imported ones. Humanity had done something no species in the galaxy had ever achieved. They had become the reference point. The final measure of patience came in the form of acceptance. Civilizations that once scoffed at human influence now defended it. Terrans help. Terrans listen. Terrans don't interfere. The galaxy repeated it like a mantra, never realizing that the more they said it, the more untrue it became. Because influence is not declared. It's felt. And humanity had wrapped its presence so gently around galactic civilization that pulling it away would feel like losing gravity itself. Back on Earth, the fold kept watching. Not in fear, not in greed, but in quiet satisfaction. Their model was working. The galaxy was becoming stable, predictable, aligned, and none of it required a single shot fired. After all, predators don't always kill. Sometimes they wait until the prey no longer remembers what life was like without them. There was no invasion. No grand fleet darkened the skies. No weapon was fired. No system fell under siege. But still, the galaxy changed forever. It began with a report. A Marnati historian, tasked with compiling a cultural audit for the Galactic Convergence's centennial, noticed a strange trend. Over the past 80 years, every major diplomatic breakthrough involved at least one human advisor. Every economic model showing long-term success was built using Terran algorithms. And the most taught philosophies in academic institutions across 8 sectors? Terran. At first, it was dismissed. Correlation, not causation. Until the pattern repeated over and over. The report spread quietly at first, a curiosity among scholars and data analysts. Then came the independent confirmations. From the Genari Trade Archives, from the Cerathes Cultural Analytics Division, from the Deep Scan Memetics Review Bureau on New Ulthar. And then came the whispers. Had humans engineered this? Across the galaxy, quiet panic rippled under the surface. For centuries, Terrans have been seen as allies, helpers, peacekeepers. But now, it appeared they had quietly embedded themselves into every system that mattered. Diplomacy, trade, education, communications, even religion in some frontier worlds had adopted Terran spiritual metaphors. This wasn't conquest. It was redefinition. Suddenly, eyes turned to Earth. To the embassies, the mediators, the advisors who had always seemed so benign. What if they weren't? Emergency summits were called. Former rivals united under shared suspicion. Delegates drafted declarations to reclaim cultural sovereignty, to audit Terran influence, to rebalance galactic power. But the protests never reached their targets. Because the very systems those declarations were drafted in, translation protocols, data, encryption, diplomatic formatting, were Terran in origin. Their messages passed through Earth-standard servers, routed through human influence networks. Their own infrastructure had made Earth unavoidable. That was when the galaxy truly woke up, not to war, to dependency. Species across the stars realized they could not function without Terran support. Governments couldn't operate. Economies couldn't sustain. Educational systems relied on Terran methods. Artificial intelligences had been built using human logic trees. And even internal revolts used Earth-centric definitions of justice and rebellion. Humanity hadn't built an empire. They had become the operating system of civilization. And the worst part? No one had stopped them because no one had noticed. But one final test remained. The Cerathes High Order, the last of the ancient powers, sent a message. A formal call for a council. On Earth, the Cerathes never met on alien soil. Not once in over 2 million years. But this time, they didn't demand a Terran audience. They requested it. The meeting took place not in a great galactic hall, but in a simple glass-walled chamber atop the rebuilt UN headquarters in Geneva. Present were the delegates of hundreds of species, some curious, some furious, all uncertain. The Terran spokesperson was not a politician or general. She was a teacher. She wore no insignia. She brought no guards, just a digital tablet and a calm expression. When she spoke, it was soft but deliberate. "You're not wrong," she said. "We are everywhere. In your stories, your schools, your cities. But we didn't take that from you. You gave it to us." Some scoffed. She continued. "You feared each other. You mistrusted each other. And we listened. We helped you talk. We helped you rebuild. We offered help no one else would. Not because we're perfect, but because we know what fear does. We lived it. On our own planet, we nearly destroyed ourselves before we learned how to survive together." She tapped her tablet, displaying a timeline of Earth's history. Wars, catastrophes, recoveries. Empires fall, she said. Ideologies burn. But connection? That endures. The Cerati delegate, towering and glass-like, leaned forward. "Connection is not the same as control," it rasped. "No," the human replied, "but control often follows where connection leads, if no one else is paying attention." She didn't smile. She didn't need to. The silence that followed wasn't hostile. It was acceptance, because deep down, every delegate in that room already knew the truth. They had chosen this, not all at once, but over decades, in trade deals, in alliances, in shared victories. Humanity had simply been patient, helpful, present. While others fought to be first, humans made themselves indispensable. And now, the galaxy was built around them. In the following weeks, attempts to isolate Earth fizzled. Some treaties were restructured, some cultural initiatives withdrawn, but nothing stuck. The systems were too integrated, the influence too deep. Removing humanity was like trying to remove oxygen from air. There was no war. There was just realization. And Earth? Earth didn't celebrate, because they didn't need to. They hadn't conquered the stars with force. They had simply become essential. And in that moment, the galaxy understood. The most dangerous predator is not the one that strikes in anger. It's the one you never saw coming.